A Marvel director has recently been in an interview and decided to criticize Zack Snyder in an attempt to get a job at DC. Hey everyone, welcome back to our movie news. Moonknight director Mohamed Diab was recently in an interview with Cosmic Circus, talking about his time on Moonknight. However, the interview switched to discussing DC, and I think Diab has made it quite clear that he wants to work on the DCU and doesn't really care who he disrespects to do so. So, what did Mohamed Diab say? Well, he was asked what his thoughts were on Gunn being hired to run the DCU, and he said, "I know that some people don't like James Gunn, but I see him as a great artist who will do great work. Frankly, I didn't like the past period. The last film, Justice League, was significantly better than the first version, but in the end, Snyder's work in all the movies he made didn't appeal to me. I liked James Gunn's films much more. I think he's a much greater artist and a very clever writer, and he will do excellent work for DC. I hope people just won't criticize him, because if he loses the DC audience, he's done. But he is an artist and he will create wonderful things." Firstly, I like that optimism. In fact, I share that optimism that the DCU will do great work. And I do agree with his second from last line. If he loses the DC audience, he is done. So, he has made a good point there. However, I think it is quite unprofessional to discredit another artist's work publicly like that. I don't think you should tear down multiple directors when you, yourself, are a director. I believe that is rude and disrespectful. Imagine an actor doing the same thing about another actor. It's just something you don't do as a professional, and you definitely don't do it to someone in the same business as you. My problem isn't that he feels that way, because it's fine if Snyder's films didn't appeal to him, or he thought James Gunn's films were better. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion, and that's the beauty of films. We all have different opinions on them, and nothing is a fact. The issue is how he presented that opinion and did so publicly. If the question was about Snyder's work, it makes more sense to talk about his work. Or if he was asked to compare Snyder's and Gunn's work, then that too makes more sense, and that would be the fault of the interviewer asking such a conflicting question. But that wasn't the case. He was only asked about James Gunn being in charge of the DCU. So talk about James Gunn. Nowhere in the question did they ask about the old DCEU or Zack Snyder, just purely what he thought of Gunn being in charge. But he decides the best way of praising James Gunn is by criticizing another director's work. That, in my opinion, is the lowest form of a compliment. All he had to do was talk about James Gunn's work. He has 5 projects in the comic book genre that he could talk about, and instead he talks about Snyder's work and the rest of the DCEU and how it didn't appeal to him, saying how Gunn is much better than Snyder. Specifically, a much greater artist. Now, whether or not you agree with that statement is another conversation, because we need to be consistent here. Just because you agree with what he is saying doesn't mean it is appropriate to say publicly. He is a director, a professional in the same field as Zack Snyder and James Gunn. Praising other creatives is great. It's a really positive thing to do in the industry, and is always mutually beneficial. But he's done it in a backhanded way. Not a direct, true compliment, but one that only works because he insults the other director's work too. Because this doesn't just go to Snyder, but every other director in the DCEU. He said, "I didn't like the past period," meaning he didn't like the work from the other directors either. So he is criticizing all 8 directors, minus James Gunn, that worked in the DCEU. I think that is quite rude to all the directors who worked on the DC Extended Universe. And this goes for any director, by the way. I instantly lose so much respect for a director when they publicly criticize, or more specifically insult, another director's work. That is the opposite of what should be happening in this industry. It's not only unprofessional, but I also think it's a big mistake. He is a low-tier director who's relatively unknown, who got his big break with Marvel, but hasn't done anything since, and the Moonknight series hasn't really been talked about since its release. I don't think he is in the position to tear down one director to try and praise another. At least with Martin Scorsese, he has the stature and experience at the highest level to say something like that. I still don't think Scorsese should criticize other directors, but at least if he said something, it's coming from a hugely successful and proven director, not a small, relatively unknown director who is still trying to make a name for himself. Maybe that's why he said it. He knows Zack Snyder and James Gunn are very clickable and newsworthy names. He knows that people will talk about him because he has said that. That evidence is this video being made. What he did worked. He got more people talking about him. And I know people say any publicity is still good publicity, but I really don't think that works here. If anything, it just shows him as an unprofessional director, which to most studios would be something they want to stay clear of. Unless that studio was getting their ego boosted by his words. Which is exactly what's going on here. He praised James Gunn, the co-head of newly formed DC Studios, by criticizing Zack Snyder and the rest of the DCEU. I think in Diab's mind, if he can get on the good side of Gunn, then he is more likely to get a job at DC. But for me, that isn't the point of the video. Sure, I completely disagree with the statement, but that isn't the reason why I made this video. For me, when you work in any industry and you publicly bash another worker in the same industry as you look extremely bad-mannered, you become dishonorable, and I would hope most would distance themselves from that employee. I'm not saying directors can't have opinions on different movies and so on. That's fine. But when you are in the public eye, you really shouldn't say things like that about other directors, no matter who you are. The reason why I'm talking about this now is because it seems to have become a common occurrence. It seems to have become a trend for directors of all sizes to come out and tear down other directors' work. Some I do agree with what they are saying, and they make agreeable points about other directors' work, but we need to detach what they are talking about and whether we agree with it, and look at it from the point of view of what are they doing to their industry? It's different for a fan criticizing a movie, as they are just a fan. They aren't in the same industry doing the same job. They are the consumer. They are who the films are made for. I know people in the comments will be saying everyone is entitled to their own opinion, and yes, I know they are. And I'm not saying he can't feel that way, but in a professional scenario, sometimes you need to keep that opinion to yourself. Especially when it can come back to haunt you later, and especially when the other director is more well known and more successful than you are. Imagine if Snyder's Rebel Moon franchise takes off and is really popular, and he needs to hire other directors to tell stories for spin-off shows and movies. Mohamed Diab may have wanted to do that, but he may have just burnt that bridge by publicly insulting Snyder's work for DC. And that job is far more important for an upcoming director like Diab than for Snyder. So you never know what opportunities you could miss out on if you decide to do something like that. I guess he is thinking about it from the opportunity standpoint. He hasn't directed anything since Moonknight and sees Gunn's DCU about to take off, and he wants to be hired to be a part of that. Because in his answer, he made it very clear that he thought Gunn is a great director, that he didn't like the DCEU, specifically Zack Snyder's work, which would imply he agrees with Gunn's decision to reboot, and then he tries to play into Gunn's ego by saying how much better Gunn is than Snyder. Like I've already stated, there is no issue with praising Gunn. I can understand why many love his work. That is not the issue with any of this. Diab's motives are clear. He's just looking to get a job with DC and seems like he doesn't care if it burns other bridges. He's just putting all his hopes on Gunn's DCU and hopes his comments pay off. I see it as a toxic form of promotion, especially on the comic book genre. The CBM genre has been taking hits from a lot of directors in recent years. Now yes, the genre has released some very weak movies recently, but the audience has made that clear. You don't need to have the directing industry implode by having director versus director happening, which is why these words from Diab feel completely unnecessary. The genre is already taking hits from directors outside of the genre, so why have a director within the genre doing the same thing? It feels completely counterproductive. It looks like a short-term desire. He's only really thinking of how this could benefit himself right now, rather than how it could impact not only his future self and the comic book genre, but the entire industry itself. I'm not saying his comments here will destroy the directing industry, but I'm saying he said this with no real concern at how this could impact the way directors talk about one another and the work they create. This could encourage other directors to openly criticize other directors, and it could cause a domino effect that won't benefit anyone. Now, maybe I'm the only one who feels like that, but I bet I'm not. I now wonder if we will see Diab be hired for a job in the DCU now he has said this. So make sure to let me know your thoughts on Mohamed Diab's comments on Snyder and Gunn and the topic in general in the comments below. But that is all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe and turn on post notifications so you never miss a video. I hope to see you here again soon, so until then, have a great day. Bye!